Hello, collectors. Sometimes the most extraordinary treasures aren't locked away in museum vaults or buried in forgotten shipwrecks. They're hiding in plain sight, possibly even jingling in your pocket right now. Today, we're exploring three seemingly ordinary U.S. quarter dollars that command extraordinary prices: the 1965, 1969, and 1982 quarters. What makes these modern coins worth thousands when most quarters from these years are only worth, well, 25 cents? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share might have you checking your change jars before the video ends. Let's start with the 1965 Washington quarter, a coin that marks a pivotal moment in American coinage history, but also contains some of the most valuable error varieties you might actually encounter. The year 1965 represents a watershed moment for U.S. coinage. After nearly 2 centuries of silver circulating coinage, America's growing economy and dwindling silver reserves forced a monumental change. The Coinage Act of 1965 transitioned our dimes and quarters from 90% silver to a copper-nickel-clad composition, what we now recognize as the modern sandwich construction with that distinctive copper core visible on the edge. This transition created the perfect storm for mint errors as the Philadelphia Mint raced to produce enough coins to meet demand while simultaneously adapting to entirely new production methods. During this chaotic period, something remarkable happened. A handful of 1965 quarters were accidentally struck on 90% silver planchets instead of the new clad blanks. These are what we call transitional errors, and they're among the most prized modern errors in numismatics. How did this happen? Well, imagine the scene at the Philadelphia Mint in early 1965. The vault still contained silver planchets from 1964 production, and as the new clad blanks were brought in, a few of those leftover silver blanks inevitably made their way into the presses. The result? Silver 1965 quarters that should never have existed. Now, here's where it gets interesting for you at home. These silver 1965 quarters look nearly identical to regular clad quarters at first glance. The key to identifying them is the edge, a solid silver edge rather than the copper sandwich layer we expect to see. They also weigh approximately 6.25 grams, notably heavier than the standard 5.67 grams of a clad quarter. If you have a digital scale that measures to hundredths of a gram, this is your first check. These transitional error quarters have sold for between $7,000 and $10,000 in recent auctions, depending on condition. But that's not the only valuable 1965 quarter to watch for. The infamous 1965 silver-proof quarter holds an almost mythical status among collectors. The U.S. Mint officially states that no proof coins were made in 1965, as they halted proof production during the coinage crisis. However, a small number of early proof-like specimens have emerged over the years, showing extraordinary strike quality and mirror-like fields. These aren't officially recognized proof issues, but rather what numismatists call special mint set quality coins with exceptional strikes. In gem condition, these can command $1,500 to $3,000 from specialists looking to complete high-grade collections. Then there's the double die varieties from 1965. During this transitional year, quality control wasn't at its peak, and several notable double die errors occurred. The most valuable shows doubling on the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust." Under magnification, you'll see clear separation in the lettering, almost like a shadow. These double dies have sold for $3,000 to $7,500 in mint state grades. What makes the 1965 quarter particularly fascinating is the contrast between its historical significance and its perceived value. Many Americans lived through this transition without recognizing its importance. The newspapers of 1964 and 1965 were filled with stories of coin shortages and hoarders stashing away silver coins. But few predicted that some of these first-year clad coins would themselves become so valuable. I recently spoke with Eleanor Richards, a retired bank teller who worked during this transition period. She told me, people would come in and ask specifically for rolls of pre-1965 quarters. No one wanted the new ones. We thought they were inferior. We called them Johnson sandwiches after President Johnson, who signed the Coinage Act. If only we'd known some of those new quarters would be worth thousands someday. The condition of these 1,965 error quarters plays a crucial role in their value. A circulated silver transitional error might bring $3,000 to $4,000, while a pristine MS-67 example could fetch $15,000 or more. For the double die varieties, where significantly impacts value, a well-worn example might bring $500, while a mint-state coin with full luster commands 10 times that amount. What's particularly remarkable about the 1965 quarter errors is their accessibility. Unlike ancient coins or classic rarities that have been hunted for generations, these quarters slipped into circulation relatively recently. Many were in everyday use for years before collectors recognized their significance. That makes them the ultimate sleeper coins, treasures that passed through countless hands, perceived as common currency. There's also a human element to these coins that fascinates me. In 2018, I met a collector at a show in Denver who found a silver 1965 quarter in a roll from his local bank. He'd been searching rolls for years, not a professional dealer, just an enthusiastic hobbyist, and described finding that transitional error as the moment that justified every hour spent hunched over rolls of quarters. His discovery, authenticated by PCGS, sold for $6,800, all from a coin that cost him exactly 25 cents. The market for these 1965-era quarters has steadily strengthened over the past decade. As more collectors focus on modern errors, recognizing them as the classic rarities of our era, prices have climbed. 10 years ago, a silver 1965 quarter might have sold for $4,000 to $5,000. Today, that same coin would likely command nearly double. For those of you hunting these treasures, I recommend focusing first on weight. The silver planchet's additional half-gram makes it easily identifiable with a precise scale. Next, examine the edge. Silver examples won't show the copper core. And finally, test with a rare earth magnet. Silver quarters aren't magnetic, while clad quarters will show slight attraction. What's particularly exciting about the 1965 quarter errors is that they're still being discovered. Unlike most numismatic rarities which have been cataloged and traced through collections for decades, new examples of these transitional errors continue to emerge from circulation and old collections. Just last year, a family in Ohio found a silver 1965 quarter while going through their deceased father's coin jar. He wasn't even a collector, just someone who happened to set aside a coin that looked different to him. The 1965 quarter also represents something profound about American coinage, the end of an era. For 173 years prior, Americans carried silver in their pockets as everyday money. The 1965 quarter marks the moment when our circulating coinage became primarily symbolic rather than containing intrinsic value. That historical significance, combined with the fascinating errors that occurred during the transition, makes these quarters not just valuable but important artifacts of American economic history. So next time you're handling change or sorting through an old jar of coins, give those 1965 quarters a second look. Weigh them if you can. Check their edges carefully. That moment of extra attention might just turn 25 cents into several $1,000s. And even if you don't find a valuable error, you're holding a piece of American coinage history. The first year our quarters contained no silver at all, a fundamental change to our money that continues to this day. Let's round out our exploration with our final treasure, the 1982 Washington quarter. While this coin might seem mundane at first glance, it harbors what many experts consider the most accessible big money error in modern U.S. coinage, the elusive 1982 no mint mark quarter. The story of this coin begins with a significant but little-known change in mint procedures. From 1965 through 1979, the Philadelphia Mint produced quarters without a mint mark, a long-standing tradition for the main mint facility. Meanwhile, quarters from Denver carried a D mint mark. But in 1980, the Mint changed this practice, adding a P mint mark to Philadelphia quarters for the first time in the denomination's history. Fast forward to 1982. By this time, mint marks were no longer punched into working dies individually. Instead, they were part of the master hub that was used to create working dies. However, in a fascinating error, some 1982 quarter dies were created without the P mint mark, not through oversight, but through active mint worker intervention. Here's what happened. At some point in the production process, a mint employee noticed that a working die had a filled or damaged P mint mark. Instead of discarding the die, They made the fateful decision to polish off the mint mark entirely, creating a die that would strike quarters with no mint mark at all, quarters that would look like the pre-1980 Philadelphia issues rather than the new standard with the P mint mark. This wasn't supposed to happen. By 1982, any quarter without a mint mark was, by definition, an error. Yet an unknown number of these 1982 no mint mark quarters entered circulation before the mistake was discovered. What makes this error particularly interesting is its scarcity combined with its findability. While exact population figures remain unclear, numismatic experts estimate that between 10,000 and 15,000 examples exist, making it much rarer than a regular issue, but common enough that collectors continue to find them in circulation even today. Unlike the 1969 S double die, which is prohibitively expensive for most collectors, the 1982 no mint mark quarter represents an achievable goal for the average enthusiast. The current market value reflects this middle ground rarity. Circulated examples typically sell for $75 to $150, depending on condition, while uncirculated specimens can command $300 to $600. Top-grade examples certified by PCGS or NGC in MS 67 or better can reach several $1,000s, with the current record being just over $6,000 for a perfect MS 68 specimen sold in 2021. I've personally had the joy of finding one of these quarters in my change at a grocery store back in 2012. It wasn't in perfect condition, probably an XF 45 grade, but the thrill of discovering a $100 plus coin in everyday change is something I'll never forget. That's the magic of these accessible rarities. They create those eureka moments that hook collectors for life. How do you identify a genuine 1982 no mint mark quarter? First, check the date. It must be 1982. Next, look for the absence of a P mint mark, which should appear to the right of Washington's ponytail on regular 1982 Philadelphia quarters. Be careful not to confuse this with Denver quarters, which have a clear D in this position. Finally, as with all valuable coins, check for proper weight, diameter, and composition to rule out counterfeits. An interesting aspect of the 1982 no mint mark quarter is how it illustrates the human element in coinage production. This wasn't a mechanical error, but a deliberate decision by a mint employee to fix a problem in a way that created something far more valuable. One can imagine the worker, perhaps under pressure to meet production quotas, making a split-second decision that would eventually create a numismatic treasure. The broader historical context adds another layer of interest to the 1982 quarter. The early 1980s saw America in a severe recession, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Unemployment reached nearly 11%. Interest rates soared to unprecedented levels, and many Americans struggled financially. Amid this economic turmoil, the mint was producing coins that would eventually be worth hundreds of times their face value. A small irony of history. Condition plays a crucial role in determining the value of a 1982 no mint mark quarter. Since many examples spent time in circulation before being recognized as valuable, finding one in pristine, uncirculated condition represents a significant challenge. A heavily circulated example might sell for only $40 to $50, while a perfect mint state coin commands 20 times that amount. What's particularly fascinating about collecting the 1982 no mint mark quarter is that it represents a diminishing opportunity. Each year, fewer of these coins remain in circulation as collectors and dealers remove them. Yet the relatively modest value of circulated examples means they don't command the premium that would motivate non-collectors to systematically search for them. This creates a scenario where dedicated collectors still have a reasonable chance of finding one in the wild. I've encountered fascinating stories about these quarters over the years. One collector I met at a coin show in Pittsburgh had assembled what he called the No P collection, examples of every known quarter, nickel, and dime that was missing its Philadelphia mint mark due to error. He told me his 1982 quarter was the cornerstone that inspired the entire collection. Another collector shared that he found 3 examples in a single roll of quarters from a rural bank in Wyoming. His theory was that the roll had been sitting in someone's collection for years before being redeposited, creating a time capsule of sorts that preserved multiple examples of this error. The 1982 quarter is also notable for another valuable variety, the 1982 D double die obverse. While not as dramatic as the 1969 S, this Denver issue shows noticeable doubling on the date and Liberty. Examples of this variety typically sell for $100 to $300 in circulated condition and $400 to $800 in mint state, making it another accessible rarity for budget-conscious collectors. For those of you building Washington quarter collections, the 1982 no mint mark represents an interesting challenge. It's not officially recognized as part of the regular series. Mintage figures don't account for it, and standard albums don't have a designated space for it. Yet many collectors consider it an essential edition, representing as it does a fascinating chapter in mint history and production methods. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just someone who enjoys checking your change, the 1982 no mint mark quarter offers a compelling target. Its combination of reasonable value, interesting backstory, and continued findability makes it a perfect entry point for those interested in error coins. And unlike some other famous errors that require specialized knowledge to identify, this one is refreshingly straightforward. Either the mint mark is there, or it isn't. As we wrap up our exploration of these three extraordinary quarters, I'm struck by a common thread that runs through them. Each represents a moment when the mint's careful procedures faltered, creating treasures out of everyday coins. The 1965 silver quarters arose from the chaos of a composition change. The 1969 S double die from a mechanical misalignment during die production, and the 1982 no mint mark from a mint worker's impromptu decision. These coins remind us that perfection is elusive, even for an institution as meticulous as the United States Mint. And in those moments of imperfection, true numismatic treasures are born. They also demonstrate that valuable coins aren't just relics of the distant past. They've been created within our lifetimes and continue to circulate among us. So the next time you receive change at a store or find an old jar of coins in a drawer, take a moment to look more closely. Among those seemingly ordinary quarters might lurk an extraordinary treasure: a 1965 silver transitional error, a 1969 S double die, or a 1982 no mint mark. Your next great find could be just a pocket away. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of modern quarter rarities. Until next time, keep searching, stay curious, and remember, in the world of coins, ordinary can become extraordinary in the blink of an eye. Now let's shift our attention to another modern quarter that hides exceptional treasures, the 1969 Washington quarter. This year doesn't mark any significant transition in coinage like 1965, but it's become legendary for producing some of the most spectacular minting errors of the modern era, particularly from the San Francisco Mint. The 1969 quarter's most famous and valuable variety is what collectors have dubbed the 1969 S double die obverse, considered by many to be the king of modern minting errors. To understand why this coin is so special, we need to look at how dies are made. The process involves multiple impressions of the design onto a die using a hub. If the die shifts between impressions, you get doubling of the design elements, creating a double die. What makes the 1969 S double die quarter extraordinary is both the extent of the doubling and its extreme rarity. The doubling is most pronounced on the date and the word Liberty, where you can see clear separation between the primary and secondary impressions. It's so dramatic that even casual observers can spot it without magnification, a characteristic that distinguishes truly great double dies from minor varieties that require microscopic examination. As for rarity, we believe there are fewer than 20 authentic examples known to exist, making this quarter rarer than many classic American rarities that sell for hundreds of thousands. While millions of 1969 S quarters were produced, these few double die errors somehow escaped the mint's quality control and entered circulation, where most remained for years before being recognized. The discovery story of this coin adds to its mystique. The first known example wasn't identified until 1975, when a San Francisco bank teller noticed one in his register. Thinking it might be valuable, he set it aside, a decision that would prove quite fortunate. Other examples were found by ordinary collectors examining their change or bankrolls years after the coins entered circulation. The current market value of the 1969 S double die quarter is simply staggering for a modern coin. In circulated condition, authentic examples regularly sell for $50,000 to $75,000. Mint state specimens have reached prices exceeding $125,000 at auction. In 2019, an exceptionally well-preserved example graded MS 67 by PCGS sold for a record $186,000, an astronomical sum for a coin that was made within many of our lifetimes. Unfortunately, this value has made the 1969 S double die one of the most counterfeited American coins. Sophisticated forgeries abound, and authentication by a major grading service is absolutely essential before purchasing one. The most common counterfeits are created by taking genuine 1969 S quarters and mechanically altering them to simulate doubling, or by using modern computer-controlled engraving to create fake dies with doubling. Here's what to look for if you think you've found one. Genuine examples show strong doubling on the date, particularly on the digits 1 and 9. The word liberty shows pronounced doubling, especially on the L, B, and R. The doubling appears as a clear secondary impression, not as a fuzziness or overlap that might indicate a struck-through error or post-mint damage. Beyond the famous double die, there are other valuable 1969 quarter varieties. The 1969 S missing S is another significant rarity. In this case, quarters intended to bear the San Francisco S mint mark were struck without it, creating a variety that appears to be a Philadelphia issue but was actually produced in San Francisco. These can sell for $7,000 to $12,000 in uncirculated condition. I had the pleasure of interviewing Frank Gasparo's nephew a few years ago, Gasparo being the chief engraver at the time these errors occurred. He shared that his uncle was mortified when the double die quarters came to light. Uncle Frank prided himself on perfection, he told me. The fact that these errors escaped the mint was considered a serious quality control failure at the time. This insight adds a human dimension to these coins. Behind every error is a person who unintentionally created a rarity. The condition of 1969 S double die quarters significantly affects their value, even more so than with most rare coins. Since so few exist, condition rarity compounds overall rarity. A heavily circulated example might sell for only $35,000, while a pristine specimen can command well over $150,000. This price discrepancy reflects not just aesthetic preference, but the incredible unlikelihood of such a rare error surviving in perfect condition. The quarter dollars of 1969 also tell an interesting story about American coin production. This was a period when the San Francisco facility was primarily producing proof coins for collectors, but it supplemented circulation strikes during high-demand periods. This dual role, producing both perfect collector specimens and mass-produced circulation coins, created unique pressures that may have contributed to quality control oversights. What's particularly interesting about the 1969 S double die is how it compares to its famous predecessor, the 1955 double die cent. While the 1955 penny is more widely known among collectors, the 1969 S quarter is significantly rarer and more valuable. Yet many casual collectors remain unaware of its existence, creating an opportunity for knowledgeable searchers. In 2014, a remarkable discovery made headlines when a collector found a 1969 S double die quarter in a roll of quarters purchased from his bank. He paid 25 cents for a coin that would later be authenticated and sold for over $84,000. Stories like this keep the dream alive for numerous collectors who continue to search through modern quarters hoping for that once-in-a-lifetime find. Hunting for the 1969 S double die reminds us that incredible rarities can hide in everyday places. While you could spend a lifetime searching rolls and never find one, the possibility exists, and that thrill of the hunt keeps many collectors engaged. Unlike ancient coins or classic early American issues which were recognized as collectible from their beginning, these modern rarities circulated anonymously for years. There's a peculiar irony to the 1969 S double die. The year 1969 saw Americans achieve one of humanity's greatest technological triumphs, landing on the moon. Yet at the same time, The mint was producing coins with errors resulting from essentially the same process used since the 1700s. This juxtaposition, cutting-edge space technology alongside traditional minting techniques, makes these error coins fascinating historical artifacts beyond their monetary value. I've spoken with several collectors who've built complete Washington quarter sets, but leave an empty hole for the 1969 S double die, acknowledging both its place in the series and the unlikelihood of ever acquiring one. One collector told me, "That empty space in my album reminds me that there's always something more to aspire to in this hobby." So while you sort through your quarters, pay special attention to any 1969 S issues. Examine the date and lettering carefully. While finding an authentic double die example is admittedly a long shot, other valuable varieties from 1969 are more common. And remember, every great collection begins with paying attention to the details others miss.